I think courage is really important. I think you have to be courageous to go after things that are broken. Most people are cowards. Like, I think what a leader does, like what a good king does, is you pick up the sword, you charge the front. And I know we don't do that anymore because of machine guns and other things in war, but like that was like what a king's job was. And to me, that was how my dad raised me. And that is why I'm able to like solve a lot of problems. And I want to try to keep doing that. And, you know, every success I have is a bigger platform from which to fight and fix things. And so I think we're just getting started.
The Yesterday podcast is brought to you by Ro, the all-in-one banking platform for startups. Thousands of companies use Ro. You get everything you need to manage your startup's cash. Fast banking setup, cards with up to 2% cashback, and yield that turns your company cash into extra runway. All super useful in the early days of launching. But the thing founders really love about Ro is their team. Candidly, they were amazing to partner with us on. They're about 3 hours ahead of my time zone. I don't think they ever took over 10 minutes to respond back to a text or email of mine. They're obsessed with helping founders beat industry giants, and will go to the end of the earth to help them do so. Exclusively for Yesterday Pod listeners and viewers, you'll get a $1,500 statement credit and tons of exclusive perks when you manage your company cash with Ro. Terms and conditions apply. To learn more, visit ro.co/yesterday. That's rho.co/yesterday. Ro's a fintech, not a bank. Checking and card services provided by Webster Bank. Member FDIC. See rewards terms for details.
It's a pleasure to have you. I think what we'll do is we'll start as early as possible with your childhood chess and things of the sort, and then build up to present day.
Early as possible, it'd be like hundreds of years ago.
Hundreds
your
of years
ancestors and all of the backgrounds they feed into, which is also important, you know.
Could be
I
interesting.
don't know if that's how you think of the world, but anyway, we don't have to start there.
We could start there. Let's do that.
Yeah.
The history of the world before your life.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting input, right? Because my father's side were mostly very poor Irish people who came in the mid-19th century, although there was like a couple other English and Scottish branches that were in America even earlier. And very proudly, you know, my great-grandfather's tombstone has like World War I and World War II on it. He was very proud of his role as a fighter for America.
Yeah.
He's, you know, from Maine. Amazing father's side. I go on for a lot. I was the oldest of 19 cousins on the Irish Catholic side. And then my mother's side was Jewish. And my grandma came here. She was brought here in 1920 when she had just been born. And she actually died a couple of years ago. She died at 103.
Sorry to hear that.
And she lost most of her, 103 is pretty good. She made it pretty far. You know, she lost most of her extended family in the Holocaust, but her core family, her grandfather actually came here in 1910 and brought her. So it's interesting. There's a combination of like people who've been in America a lot longer, poor Irish family who then, you know, were middle class, but are good Americans. My grandfather was an inventor who invented all sorts of things, but he never really focused on making money. That wasn't his focus.
What did he make?
I mean, he built electric cars for his family. He made a bus for the family. He knew like spinning tables. There's this news article I have where 1957 it shows an intercom he made for the boys' dormitory. You know, with my dad, three of some of his brothers, like, so they can go yell at them to like be quiet or whatever. But it's like it was just a different culture. It wasn't entrepreneurship. It was like caring about family, caring about friends, caring about the country.
Yeah.
My mom's, my bubby's, we could call bubby means grandma in Yiddish. My bubby's grandfather, he was quite successful in America. But then his son, my great-grandfather, I gave it all back, basically. He was too generous, apparently, to everyone he worked with, and he wasn't the best businessman. So we have this, like, very nice family that was, like, basically middle class on both sides. But my dad's super competitive. My mom cares a lot about education as well. And we grew up here in Silicon Valley.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about, before we get into all this stuff, just your principles and you know where the influence comes from, whether it's like some level of like Eastern and Western philosophy, some sort of mix, maybe your Jewish faith. Talk a bit more about what drives you and kind of what your fundamental principles are.
Yeah, no, I think all of us are shaped by a combination of things. And obviously a lot came from my father, who, he's still alive, he's not doing well, unfortunately, but he's very kind of smart, dynamic, competitive guy, very competitive. We love games.
Yeah.
We love to like stand up for what's right. It's very much important. Like I was the oldest of 3 brothers, the oldest of 19 cousins. And like one of the most important things was to like take pleasure in the success of your family and friends and to help them be better. That was just like, that's like always what he was doing.
Yeah.
And so that's really, really core to who I am. And my dad was also a natural leader. And I think you get that as well, along with the competitiveness. And you know, the Judaism side, it's almost like a softer side in a way. So if you think the Irish, English, you know, kind of like side is more fighters, like despite what we might think of Israel today, like the Jewish side's more kind of scholars than fighters, and it's more intellectual side in some ways, like, and really deeply valued education. My dad cared about it too, of course, but it was just like there's even more on that side. And then there's something soft in Judaism where like the core part, I think one of the core insights for what we call our Judeo-Christian society is like the equal dignity of every human life. And that's something that's just really important. And it's important you kind of like, when you're young, I was always lucky to be kind of like the kid who was ahead on everything. And I lost a lot of really smart friends who were ahead of me in some things sometimes too. But I was, always perfect scores and like and really good at games and really good at sports. And so I got a lot of confidence as a kid. And you kind of realize how like in the world, the smartest people are the ones kind of driving things forward and changing things and fixing things. But at the same time, like the Judaism and the Judeo-Christianity, I guess you'd call it as well, because it comes from both sides, is all about how like every human life really matters. So even if someone's like not doing as well or not helping or causing trouble, like their life still has as much worth as yours. And I think that's a really important way to look at like dialectic that kind of grounds you. This is really important. So having both of those is really key.
Why do you think you were so confident? You said the game, so do you think it was mainly chess?
Chess was important. I was a state chess champion twice. No, but I mean, I don't want to be obnoxious, but like I was way ahead at math as a 3 and 4 year old, and like, we got to go ahead grades in elementary school with my 5 or 6 friends.
Yeah.
Listen, I was lucky to be born where I had some natural talents where I was pretty good at everything I did. So that's like, I mean, it's obnoxious, but it's, it is what it is. I'm very confident, and when I'd see problems as a kid, I'd want to fix them. I've always had that personality of I want to help others fix them, and I think I learned from my dad how to help others see the best in themselves and like be inspired to to achieve what they can. Charles Koch puts it really well as one of my favorite business philosophers, where he talks about how he wants everyone he works with to self-actualize, right? He goes to the Maslow's hierarchy basically, and like the highest thing is to like self-actualize and improve yourself and achieve what you're able to achieve. Aristotle will talk about this, where you're happiest if you're like using your capabilities to the full. Mm-hmm. And so competition has that, but so does everything else in life, where you want to like help people like just do the best they can and live to their fullest of their capabilities.
Mm-hmm. What did you do as a kid to help your dad sort of realize that and do more of that?
Well, my father was a chess coach.
Yeah.
And so because you hit on that, which is really key, because so his team like won the state like 20 years in a row, which is pretty unusual.
It's actually super funny. I have this. Let me show this to you. Pulled this up. This is your name. You guys won. And I was like, how in the world did you guys win every single time? And I was like, oh, it was your dad who coached for all the years.
It wasn't just me. It was like literally my dad.
It was the same school.
And I guess why Bell was the one competitor who he'd like have like this like tough fight with, that would like win 2 of those years. And that was the other school across the road, ironically.
Yeah,
and
that's so crazy. And so how many years did your dad teach chess?
Well, this was not even his full-time job. This was like a hobby on the side, which is actually pretty amazing, right?
Why was he so good at it?
He's very competitive, and he's very smart, and he just had a natural talent for it, And he wasn't like the best chess player. He was a great chess player, but there were plenty of people who are much better chess players than him. It's like being the best coach is not about being the best. It's not the same thing as being the best player. I mean, if you want, I can like give you like a little bit of the formula. I don't know if you're interested. No, it's like there's quite a few things. One of them is in chess. You want to learn tactics when you're younger. So tactics as opposed to position play. So you're like studying like positions 2-3 moves ahead. So you want to get really good at tactics. You want to play over the games of the great players starting from the 19th century, because those games are something that your brain's able to like understand. Whereas if you start with the more modern games, it's just so much more advanced that the younger players don't even know what's going on. So it doesn't actually help you get better. So you want to kind of start studying at a different level. And then you want to, every time you play a game, you like write down your move, and you think about it, and there's always whole policy. And afterwards, you play over the game, and you talk about what you did, and you learn. And then there's this like formula for how he has like the kids like teach each other basically, and how each of the kids like help each other too. So you have this like big process where you're doing your homework and you're learning, and there's like the principle. You have to memorize the 30 principles of chess. So all this stuff you do is like a huge program he's built out. And then it's like how you use the kids to teach each other is really important too.
What did your brothers do? Were they similarly as competitive as you?
Yeah, so each of my brothers and I were state chess champions actually.
Interesting.
So there's 3 of us. I guess I was twice, but they were pretty good.
What do they do now?
The youngest one's the CEO, is doing very well in the tech world, and we do a lot together. The middle one, right now I think he's taking some time off and advising some people between here and Vietnam. His wife's Vietnamese, and she has great business. Wow. But he's done very well, and he's extremely bright. But maybe he's more cynical and I'm more optimistic, so it's just different. I'd probably start a lot more things because of that.
Touch a bit on your mom and what your family life was like when you were young.
She was a very loving but very but very strict. Super strict, but like she had, there's things that are right ways of doing things, and wrong ways of doing things, and there's things that are priorities and things that matter. She was kind of like the rock of the family. It was really, she's been gone for 20 years. I really miss her. But yeah, she there's something about just her role of just like holding everything together and making things matter, and just like teaching you like how to focus on what you want to care about. But yeah, very loving person.
Yeah. How did you spend most of your high school years? Was it primarily playing chess?
So I was a state chess champion in 5th and 6th grade.
Gotcha.
And at the age of about 13, I don't know if puberty had anything to do with this, but basically like, I'm like, you know what, my chess teacher, you asked about wisdom before. There was a lot of Eastern wisdom from my chess teacher. There was this guy who, my dad was great, but when he got to a certain level, he brought in someone else who we worked with for several years. And a great man named Richard Shorman, who's since passed away, and he did like teach us a lot of Eastern philosophy as well. And I mean, again, I was just like overconfident youth who was like way ahead in a bunch of things. So he's like, you're going to be a great man, but if you have to be good and not evil. And here's like all these principles in the Bhagavad Gita and like all these different types of things and ideas. He kind of saw himself as a bit of like a Yoda or an Aristotle, I guess, which I'm very lucky to have someone like that in my life. But one of the lines he told me, which I thought was funny, he said, nearly every great man was a chess player, but few chess players are ever great men. And so at 13, I'm like, okay, I'm really good at this. If I kept going, I could become a grandmaster, but I want to learn how to program and I want to like play sports and I want to talk to people of the opposite gender more. So it's like, I mean, there were a few girls in chess, but not too many, unfortunately.
So how do you spend most of your high school time? I guess you're like 14 now, you have this chess coach.
So programming, building games, trying to pretend I was a little bit of a hacker temporarily. I had friends who were better at it than me. I think I remember some of our friends once were, their dad was at Intel and we got Pentium chips. This was the 90s, and they would like have some kind of like cryo setup where you could overclock them and then you could make the Quake 2 game play better or whatever it was at the time. It was pretty, but I was surrounded, I was lucky. I grew up in Fremont. And so I'm very lucky to have just a lot of people teaching us about technology. A lot of my friends, like older brothers, some of them were building companies and stuff. So you kind of like got exposed to that in the late 90s. So I was kind of very lucky to be in the middle of that whole world.
Yeah, interesting. What did your parents push you to do, if anything, in regards to your education?
Just go to school. Like, they assumed I was going to get a PhD. That was always the basic assumption.
Yes.
It could have been computer science. It could have been something else. It probably would have been computer science. I looked at some PhD programs that were like, I always wanted to build a holodeck. I was into Star Trek, of course, like a dorky teenager. And like, I always thought that'd be super cool. I think that's how I ended up investing in Oculus and Palmer in the first couple of rounds because I was just so interested. My senior thesis, like, I have to give more credit to Stefan, who co-founded Palantir with me, but our senior thesis was in augmented reality, and so I was like always into that area and stuff. And my parents assumed I was going to go there. I'd already finished most of the computer science when I got to Stanford for undergrad, so I was doing graduate work, and like everyone assumed that, but like it turned out entrepreneurship was a pretty obvious path.
Yeah. Why did you get into CS so young? I feel like that's like now consensus. That's relatively backwards.
It was really interesting, and you could build with it. I was actually very interested in electrical engineering as well, but you just couldn't really build things with it. There's not as much like leverage to like do stuff. Yeah, I think we all had like a TI 85 and 89. Do you have one of these things?
Yeah,
really younger than me.
Used to use them. Yeah.
So
not anymore, but
so like. Classic. And I built a bunch of games first in like the basic language, and then I started learning how to like build in something that would compile to assembly. I forget how I did this. There's some site online where you could do that. And then you can build much faster games, and it's just really fun.
Interesting. And so you wanted to go to Stanford, or that was kind of like all your friends went there?
If I'm totally honest, I wanted to go to Caltech or MIT, were my first two like biases of what to do, because basically I thought I wanted to be the very best in the world at this, and so those seemed like the very, very top people were going. But I think what was different about me is that I was also like very interested in history from a young age and very interested in economics. So unlike a lot of my technical friends, I was like reading a lot of other stuff. Like my little brother, like had me reading like Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard and like all the Austrian economists and stuff. I was like when he must have been like 11 and I was 13.
Do you think this is a function of your chess coach or your dad or somebody? Like why were you doing this?
My little brother's just really smart. I don't know. It's like my dad was interested in like these areas, and then my brother would go like really deep on them, deeper than my dad ever did, I think. And so he kind of got me onto that stuff. So because I had those other interests, I'm really glad I ended up at Stanford. It was funny, my mom made me apply like the night before. And I was like, Mom, I already applied to other ones. I don't want to. And I literally just went through it. And it's actually, I'll tell you the funny thing. Just you've been asking me about myself, so I feel like kind of arrogant talking about all this stuff. But I was even worse as a high schooler. Like, so however bad I am now, and like everyone's like, God, this guy, like, we're gonna turn this podcast off. He's so obnoxious. I was actually much worse. And it's very funny. I went back and I read, I don't have it now, thank God, but I read my MIT application essay, and I'm like, I want to just punch this little guy in the face. He like, thinks he's so great. And my Stanford essay, because I did it so fast, was just like much more like not as obnoxious. And so I think that's why they waitlisted me everywhere else, and they got me in at Stanford like a few. So it worked out.
That's funny. Were your brothers like this?
They're very, very bright. They didn't want to go to the same school as me. Jonathan went to Loyola Marymount, which was like pretty funny because it had like a 2-to-1 girl to guy ratio on beautiful women. So he's like a much wiser young man than I am. I think my brother got some scholarship to good UC school. I don't know, different things.
That's funny. And so touch a bit more about your time at Stanford. Obviously, there's like this amazing trope of how you joined PayPal. Bella actually told me this funny story that you had applied to PayPal to intern and you got rejected.
My freshman year, I got rejected. I did end up arguing with Max on the whiteboard about something, but again, maybe the obnoxious thing is like, you gotta be careful. I'm sure Max was right. I don't know. He's much more advanced than me in this area. Yeah, Peter let me in the second year. Listen, at Stanford, I joined a fraternity that was like, I ended up hiring a lot of them for Palantir later. It wasn't officially an engineering fraternity, but it was less It was a
bit
less
nerdy.
cool one. It was a less cool one. Like our friends over at Sigma Chi would have like all like the thetas running around with like half their clothes on, and then they remember having a party once where 3 girls came, and it's like, so yeah, whatever. We weren't the coolest, but we were really good at computer science. Some of us. No, it was a good group of guys. Some of them were much cooler than me. I shouldn't say that about the whole group. There are a lot of good ones. I had a girlfriend while I was there the whole time who I'd met right before freshman year, and we dated for a few years. It was a great woman. She's doing really well. A triple major. She's a smart girl, and I was just really focused on. I took a bunch of classes. I took like maximum units the whole time. Took a bunch of graduate computer science, and math theory. It was just fun. It was kind of like a playground. It was like really interesting to be there. And then like I played intramural sports and just keep super busy. I was the editor of the review. I got in a bunch of arguments around that. I guess I've always had really strong opinions that I just when people say something wrong, like if someone sends something to the dorm list that I think is stupid, like I guess I would just reply and explain, like, actually, you shouldn't go to this protest, and here's why. This doesn't make any sense. And people would have to come to it. Was funny. One of the guys, my RCC, which means your residential computer guy, who was like one of the leadership staff in my sophomore dorm before I was in the fraternity, he had to come talk to me because everyone else was afraid of me. And I ended up hiring him for Palantir. He's still running Palantir right now.
What's his name?
But it's Aki. You know Aki. Aki's still running
Touch
Palantir.
more on that. Why was everybody scared of you?
Well, I had strong opinions, and I was like sending these things about why these things were wrong. And I guess he was the only one they would like want who was like willing to come talk to me. Like, Joe, like, you're offending people when you send that to the list. I'm like, well, they offend me by sending these things to the list. It's very funny.
What are some opinions you had when you were, I guess, freshman, sophomore?
Most of the environmental causes they were pushing were wrong, and they were not thought through. They were religious as opposed to rational. The people who were coming to protest stuff, who had just egged a synagogue, should not like be able to advertise on our dorm list, or if they do, I'm going to tell them why they're wrong, and I shouldn't get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
We had to read the Quran in one part of Stanford class, and I had some opinions on it that people came and screamed at me, and I said, well, these are my opinions, and then they called me up to the school and said, you can't have these opinions, and I said, no, well, this is clearly wrong. This is clearly something I don't think is good. And like you read it and tell me why. He's like, doesn't matter. I don't want to read it. Like, you're not supposed to say this. I'm like, I thought this was like a university. Like, this is not a madrasa. What the hell are you talking about? So like, there'd be things like that,
When did you first meet Teal? What was that like?
I was the editor of the Stanford Review, so I think it must have been at Stanford Review dinner. I think maybe also like he spoke at something. I was never to the entrepreneurial clubs at Stanford. They always seemed like quite cheesy to me at the time. So it was like a lot of people they were trying to hire computer scientists as opposed. So it's like wasn't really my interest, even though I was interested in entrepreneurship. So it probably was more Stanford Review, and I think he and I both have a pretty strong interest in history and economics and philosophy. I think his philosophy was way ahead of mine at the time. I didn't take it, and he did. But he has like lots of opinions on the world that come from different angles, and he likes to debate them, and that's something that I also obviously have. So we had this like intellectual kind of connection where I think we were able to get along, and he ended up asking me to come work with him.
Was it clear then that Teal and other people he was working with were a bit ahead of their time, or was it unclear?
It was clear to me that he was intellectually one of the most interesting people that had been there. Like I actually did this thing sophomore year where I reached out. It's like a dozen successful people, try to get to know them and see how I could add value to them. And like, it was just whatever. I don't know if this is like a good idea or not. It's probably not a bad idea for people in college. Like who do I want to go work for? Who do I want to go learn from? And like, of all the people I met, he was just by far the most intellectually dynamic. And so even though he wasn't really famous at the time, and I couldn't have told you he'd be as famous as he was now. It was just more interesting and felt like a better fit for my interest.
There's this kind of like trope that you've had throughout your life, or like thoughtful intentionality around going towards talent dense clusters. This is probably a function of why you were rejected PayPal, but still we're like, no, I have to work here. Like, doesn't fucking
This
matter.
is becoming more obvious to everyone now, right?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't as obvious 25 years
It
ago.
wasn't. But the question being, why was it to you, and why was it so clear that you had to work at PayPal?
To me, you want to be around the most interesting people that I could learn something from. I like had some other internship freshman year, and I just learned basically nothing. If anything, I was teaching the people their stuff, which is terrible because I was 18. I don't want to attack them. It was some like silly startup. This is the year 2000, so it was like I don't want them to. It's like this will be the one mention of them online. They'll think they'll probably. I haven't seen them in 20 years. They'll probably be really sad. I'm like, yeah, those dumb people.
Terrible.
No, I mean, they're very nice people. I just wasn't learning anything.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in ideas and in improvement. And like I was at Stanford taking really advanced things to push myself. It made sense, like follow the most interesting, the most dynamic people, like where are the people I admire the most going, and then go try to work with them and learn and build together,
What were most of your friends doing at that time?
Teaching computer science at Stanford and going way ahead in math and CS and getting their PhDs and MIT and Berkeley and Stanford and Caltech or whatever. I had some friends who were more into history, but it was very few. Most of the ones I was closer to were kind of going deep on the tech side. It's funny looking back, but it wasn't that hard getting all of our smartest friends to come work with us. I think because we just had a really interesting place and it was a natural place. Once we already had like some of our smartest friends, it was just more fun to be there than to be somewhere else. And someone was telling me the other day they want to hire people who don't know each other, for me, I totally disagree. I think it's like really good if they like each other and like admire each other and want to like work hard together and then be at the office late together. I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, probably. Is that what drew you towards PayPal? Really, just like close, most of your friends were there, or what was the story?
No, it was people I admired who were there. That was like everyone there was older than me. So when people talk about the PayPal mafia, it's like Peter's 15 years older than me, Elon's 12 years older than me. They're both friends, but they're both people who I get no credit for any of that stuff. I was just like a kid who was learning there basically, and I did get to know some more people there. And I guess there were people like Bob McGrew who were working there who I didn't know from my fraternity and from Stanford Review and stuff. I ended up recruiting him to Palantir later as a key person. He ended up building OpenAI after that, after a decade. But so there were some people there who I knew, but it was mostly like getting to know them there. But kind of having watched from the computer science department, people like had like kind of heard about it and knew through friends who were going there was more the impetus because I was pretty young at the time.
Yeah. Why do you think Thiel took this liking to you to eventually let you join Clarium and be a very meaningful partner at Clarium?
He gave a lot of young people. I think he gave a lot of young people a chance who were smart. I think he likes people who are smart and who argue with him and who bring him fresh ideas and who are intellectually dynamic. To really get along with him, I think you have to have like an interest in economics and history and philosophy. Like I said, I think having that and then being able to build stuff, obviously I was able to be useful. My kind of self-startedness was like off the charts. And so when I was there, I'd like bring smart friends to help us with things and push things ahead and be like, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. And so I ended up, there wasn't really another manager there. So I ended up kind of running a lot of the place just by being confident, which was very productive, but also I think there's some people who were like 10 or 15 years older who were pretty resentful at the time. Yeah. But looking back, I can see why I'd be obnoxious. Yeah. But it just, it's like not like he put me in charge. I just started doing stuff and creating things.
What was Elon like back then?
So I only knew Elon a little bit that far back because he had just been kind of like moved out of the company when I was going in. So I only actually acted a little bit. He's a very smart, very intense, very hardworking guy. But I've really gotten to know him better in the last decade, to be honest.
Makes sense. And sort of like around this time, you're working at Clarium and you had just graduated. What were you doing there? I know this is like a common story you've told where like there's some inefficiency. I forgot what it was. It made a large amount of money.
I think there's all sorts of these things. But I mean, it was kind of fun because it was Peter's family office. So there's all sorts of companies at the time. He was investing in Facebook. He was investing in I remember Zoom with Kevin Hartz, and I was helping out there. It's actually very funny. The first time Kevin tried to hire me away, it was like Peter then took valued me more, which was very funny. It's just there's always like indicators. It's very funny. I think everyone has to do these things. And yeah, there was like this macro trading fund. I did a bunch of research projects on like all sorts of like commodities and currencies and like fixed income around the world. And I think the smartest guy there was Kevin Harrington, who I think he's still part of the National Security Council actually, because Peter hooked him in there as a genius kind of physics PhD who studied physics and biology and other things. And he would come up with these like crazy conspiracy theories about how the world worked, and like more than half of it would like clearly be wrong. Although maybe there's like something there that no one knew.
What are some of these stories?
Oh gosh, he's gonna be pissed at me because he's still like into power. I gotta be careful because he's still in power. But it'd be like connecting all of this stuff to other things happening and to the people running a part of a world. But every once in a while there'd be like these genius patterns he'd find. One of them, it was like really clear. It was really clear that like the hedging that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were doing, these are called GSEs, Garrett Sponsor Enterprise, it's called convexity hedging. But basically the hedging they had to do was like completely destroy the global fixed income markets. And we can walk, I mean, if you want to walk through substantively in a minute, it's like, okay, so basically you have like the interest rate is like 5 point something in late 2002. And it starts to go down because the economy starts looking like it's doing worse still because they're still in the kind of throes after the bubble, right? It's still a mess. And then Bernanke at the time was Greenspan, of course, was cutting rates. And so because he cuts rates and because it goes down more people refinance. And as more people refinance, so here's what you have. You have the GSEs are like these big leverage entities. They have tons of cash. They have a certain amount of equity. And so they have what are called assets and liabilities. Their assets are mortgage-backed securities. They're issuing mortgage-backed securities. Their liabilities are bonds they issue, and a lot of the money from the bonds comes from around the world. And so they have to match the interest rate is in the duration as much as possible, these assets and liabilities. So duration is how long a bond lasts. Yeah. And so basically, if people start to refinance, your assets start to have lower duration. And in order to like have these things matched so you're not exposed to interest rate changes, you have to go basically like buy 10-year notes, and you have to, it pulls the duration up. And so these things were so big that in order to like rebalance their duration, they'd go, when the interest rates start going down, where people start refinancing, they start going and buy 10-year notes. Now when you buy a 10-year note, you actually make interest rates go lower. Right, bond price go up, interest rates go lower. So interest rates go lower. So more people refinance. So they had to buy more 10-year notes. So more people had to refinance, and it was literally like a feedback loop in the economy. And so the interest rate would go all, when it was just going steadily down, all the way from like 5% to like 3.1 in June 2003. And then finally, when like everything that refied could refi, and the really not everything refi, but basically the duration got down to like 1 year, and it was like about as much as you can go. It's like extra force. So there's like natural force pushing back, and then at the same time, there's all this money coming out. When you refi, you spend more. So all of a sudden, there's like tons of more expenditures happening in the economy. Everything looks like it's doing better. Inflation's going up, growth's going up. Fed's gonna raise rates. So suddenly they're gonna start raising rates. And so all of a sudden, the rates go up, and then they have to sell 10-year notes. And so it went from 5 point something to 3.1, and then shot up, and all the money hit the economy as rates were shooting up. So it was like 7.3% GDP growth on the consumption expenditure side. And so anyway, this is like a crazy bond trade, because you can like basically watch it. You can be long, and then you could like, as it starts to get extreme, you start to short into it, short, and then you make a ton of money when it comes back. And this is an unwind of the forest fire effect. And this happened like 3 times over 4 years. Yeah. So we made like a ton of money trading bonds. And it was really cool because it turns out like global bonds are all really correlated for various reasons. So JGBs, the Japanese government bonds, for the first time got down to like 40 or 50 basis points right around that time, like super, super cheap. Yeah. And we were able to like massively short. So I remember having these like we looked all around the world, and like pricing like 6 months options on the JGBs was like out of the money was like so cheap. So we just made like so I remember my account, I just made like an infinite, I don't know, at the time it was infinite money for me, just like betting these things could shoot up a lot more than people realize, which they did. So it's like a very interesting game. And ultimately, you know, I've built a lot of companies. I enjoy things that scale over time, but it is like just intellectually fascinating. And I do think it is good for the world to like price global markets like more accurately and have large financial firms like balancing these things out so they don't move as dramatically, because it helps like plans for finance and stuff. So actually finance is a good thing for the economy, but it's so abstract that it's like not really nurturing for your soul. You don't feel like you're building something. It's fun, but you don't. So for me, it's like not as satisfying as creating something, although I do think it should exist.
How in the world were you actually good at this? Right, you were a computer programmer. You studied economy.
Well, I think because I think to do the macro stuff, you have to be interested in finance, interested in economics. You have to have read thousands of articles. You have to have like just been into it and had opinions about it. Like when I went to PayPal, actually as a kid, my first time there, and I was working there the first summer, my friend Ralph Ho was working for Roloff in the Treasury Department, and he taught me how to use Bloomberg, which is like the finance terminal, because like he was like rebound. He was like doing repo trading on like, I don't even know if this was appropriate at the time. I love Ralph, but it was like PayPal's a private company, and they were like trading bonds to like make extra money like safely on people's deposits, which is great. It was like a very safe version of trading bonds, but still it was like pretty fun. So I just learned how it all worked, you know? And it's like a giant game that all fits together. And it's one of those things, if you don't understand finance, you probably don't understand actually how like a lot of things work in the world. So I think it's one of those things that people should take the time to learn. I don't know. If you're interested in business, you understand how the world works. Like if you want to run the world, like the fact that there's people who are politicians who don't even have any idea how a bank works, which by the way is most of them, it's kind of scary to me, because these people are regulating them, they are making the rules. So anyway, I think if you're interested, as I am, in how the world works and where the world's going, I think it's a natural thing to want to study.
What is your thesis now of how the world will look in sort of 10 years? Again, to touch on your colleagues at ABC, Bell and Vic and a lot of them are like, Joe is always a little bit in the future, and for a fair bit of time, he's like probably accurate, and somehow he's always like a little bit ahead. There's something he's thinking about. What are you thinking about now in terms of the future? I think this is like the common AI
I think question. I was telling you before we started, I was like going on walks with various friends. I'm just briefly visiting California right now for a couple of days before I go back to the kids in Texas. And it's fun because a lot of people here are the future, and they're different versions of the future. I'm pretty confident we're going to have pretty significant productivity growth over the next 5 years in a way we haven't seen before in the last 30 years. I think if you want to make fun of tech people, you could tell us like, you know, you guys think you're doing all this great stuff, but like, where's the productivity in the economy? It's like it went up like 2% a year, like during the bubble during the 90s, and it's went up like 1.5% a year or something since then. It's like much slower than like Industrial Revolution. We had times it was going up like 3 or 4% a year. I think you get back to that. I think you get back 3 or 4% a year, and this is really, really important because there's implications for like everything about global finance and how the economy works. It's also really interesting because I think you actually start creating a lot more real wealth. I think you start bringing a lot of manufacturing back to the U.S. I think you start building homes cheaper. And this is, but I'm working on policy a lot right now because I think it's policy dependent. Like we could have really dumb policy, both from the far left and the far right, by the way. They could break this stuff, but assuming we don't, I think healthcare, education get a lot cheaper. I think it's ironic because the country's been in a bit of a tough time, obviously, lately with some of these things going on. I lost, obviously, my friend to a shooting recently. Everyone heard about it. It was very tough. I actually think like I'm actually very optimistic on the future we're going to be in if we can like not break things on the way there. So I get, and it's like there's lots and lots of versions of this that are interesting, but it's mostly about, like, for me, how do we navigate for the American worker while creating all of this wealth, and how we make sure we're like creating tons of new jobs and better jobs alongside the disruption that's going to happen. So maybe this is not too far ahead, but this is the stuff that I've been spending my time on.
Around 26 or 27, 08, Clarion had been around for maybe 5 or 6 years, and it's now a $7 billion hedge fund. You're up around 75% midway through 08. You're generally short financial stocks, but fast forward a little, the fund is down 4% that year. Palantir's struggling. Again, sorry to hear about this, but your mom had passed away that year. It's pretty hard for you. How in the world are you pushing through? What is keeping you going? Drew mentioned another podcast you could find at ABC with. Joe is this person who is so positive and has a ridiculous amount of pain tolerance. Was that consistent back then?
It was a really tough year. It was. I mean, obviously losing your mother is the toughest thing, and that kind of like probably makes you react like not as well to other things. And I'd like to think she'd raise me well enough that I'd still be strong even without her, but pretty like more volatile probably in a year like that, trying to deal with everything around it. One of the kind of the glib things I tell people now is I try to make sure I'm only responsible for the failure of one thing at a time, because that's like really bad if you're responsible for like multiple things that are not working. It's funny, my account was up 40-something% that year because I just turned it off. I just couldn't deal with it anymore, and I didn't know it was going to happen. And then Peter kept trying to trade. He kept thinking the government bailout was going to work, and he was right, but he didn't realize how deep it would go before the bailout worked. So it's ironic. We were short for like a year and a half. We were right about the crisis. We turned it around too soon. It shows you how hard this is to trade. It's hard to trade these things. There's a lot of crazy stuff that year. Listen, there was, I was not spending enough time with every one of my teams, and so I'd have like people working on things that I was really excited about that weren't quite there yet on the quant side and the finance side. We had some really cool tools between these things, and I just felt like it was so close to working. And then there was the people who started to like rebel and be angry because I wasn't there enough, and I was trying to like. And when I was there, I'd be like trying to guys stay with me really late, and like a couple of people just started becoming resentful and like attacking me. And it had some like there's like I think like one of them had like a mental illness or something, and that led them to like I don't know, but it was just like a really nasty thing where things all kind of broke down, and people obviously when some things broke down and you're in charge, then it's your fault. So I point the finger back at me. So that was a tough time.
What do you tell yourself in these tough times? Obviously, that was one point. There's a variety of other points in your life where you've had tough circumstances. You're working with your friends. You don't want to let them down. What is actually pushing you? And right now, obviously, there's a variety of other things driving you. There's ABC. You have kids,
you got to protect. Yeah, listen. I think at the time I had to make sure you protect Palantir, and like there were people attacking me at Clarion, and I had to like make sure I protected Palantir from them, and made it more about me. And so at the time I had to like step away for a little bit and not be as seen as like the main driver because it was just too dangerous. Even though I had recruited everyone, I was still driving a lot of things that I thought were pretty important. So at the end of the year, I like had to shift that up a little bit.
What did you do to get out of the line?
I started out of Par. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was other. I mean, I'd started things successfully inside of Palantir. It would have been like a third thing inside. I was going to start a new thing inside of Palantir. It just made more sense to start outside of it to clean things up, and also, it's a better way to do it. But at the same time, like stayed involved in various ways, And I'd finished vesting over 4 years. It was like unfortunate timing because the vesting thing came due exactly when there was like all these blowups going on. So I'm like, I don't really want to have to argue about this right now. So
Let's build that story up until out of Par. The first day you're at Palantir, you start working with Thiel, Karp, and others. And
Karp wasn't there the first day, but he was critical founder. Yeah.
Touch a bit on those things you built internally, what it was like working with them, and then the build up to, okay, I'm going to start out of Par.
I always want to be careful talking about the very start of Palantir because I was like the founder who was driving it early on, but it wouldn't have worked without Stefan, my roommate, who was actually also founder driving early on. It wouldn't have worked without Peter's support. If we hadn't gotten Karp to come in and at first pretend to be CEO, but then actually be CEO, it wouldn't have worked. And there's lots of wisdom he's had that's made it much bigger. Frankly, it's not just, it's like I mentioned Aki earlier. If it wasn't for Sham and Aki and Bob McGrew, who was my fraternity, went on to OpenAI, the company just wouldn't have been nearly as big and nearly as successful. So it is one of those things where it's like, I'm really proud of having like hired most of the first couple hundred people and like being in charge of a lot of things the first 5 years. But I think the real interesting story is that it's like one of those things that actually took the combined work of just a lot of amazing people, and then frankly something they have, which I didn't contribute to, is the persistence for them to like keep building and keep taking advantage of opportunity. It's just amazing. Like I used to get in trouble because I'd give offers where I'd give different sizes the company could be, and like the high size, like back in 2005, was $5 billion, and people would like yell at me and say that's ridiculous. It's not gonna be $5 billion. I'm like, no, I think this is how we could get there over the next several years. And it was kind of ridiculous at that time. Like back then, there was nothing new gets like that. And so but I never imagined it'd be like whatever it is, $400 billion market cap. It's amazing. I'm so proud of this team, and I did put them in place. I can't take credit for their work though. It's pretty amazing,
You were essentially a bunch of Stanford kids running around going up against the government. People must.
Well, in theory, we're trying to work with the government.
Yeah, work with them.
Going up against the primes, maybe is what you want to say. Which are kind of like the government, though. You're right.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a lot of pushback. You're quite young and you're trying to do this thing in a very regulated field. This has also been a consistent theme, regulation, that you kind of go towards archaic industries. But that was your first attempt at it at a very young age.
Yeah. Well,
what was that like?
Well, I mean, it was very frustrating for quite a while. You had to like be really persistent. And like the idea is the reason some of these regulated industries, and I've built in lots of different areas, but quite a few of them have been regulated. The reason they're interesting to build in is because they're so broken. I think this is a really important point. Like because these things are like artificially protected and skewed, and like if you can actually get in and have competent people, it's like you just like win, because you're just like 10 times better and you shame everyone. And that's what we did. It just took a long time because they're worth the past. I mean, it was all set up to be crony and to only support the existing things there. So you had to just consistently keep building allies. Every once in a while, you'd find some ally who like had honor and would want to push for you. Joe Felter, who I still know at Stanford today, in 2005 was deployed in Iraq in 2005, 2006, and he had honor and he wanted the best solution to save the lives of his comrades, and he pushed to bring it in like at the time, and along with others there, and it only worked because of people like him who there are these like diamonds in the rough who are willing to go around the system and cause trouble to ask for the right things, and so you can win. And it really, if it wasn't for both Palantir and SpaceX, though, which each had to push insanely hard, each had to do all these unnatural acts, each had to eventually sue the government, then you wouldn't have kind of made that new path. I think Palantir and SpaceX made that new path, and it took us a long time. And then I think Anduril's obviously driven through and made the path even stronger. And now you actually do get a lot more. It's like it's still really hard. People underestimate how hard it is and how hard it is to build a team in DC, but it is at least not as hard as it was.
When did you really feel it was clicking? You had this thesis about the world, it was regulated, and then things kind of started working.
It's really hard to put it. There was definitely a time when it really wasn't working, where we'd have like a bunch of things fall apart in year 3, and a bunch of the guys, some people I mentioned, not all of them, like threatened to quit. They're gonna quit, and I had to convince them, please stay for 6 more months, and like, it's like all these, it's really interesting. And then we got some big contracts to come through, and kind of everyone stayed, and it worked. But I mean, the first time, one of the early trips to DC, I remember you get a rental car, which I haven't got one of those in a while. I got a rental car. And then you drive to the address of the hotel, and it turned out, I didn't know that DC had like Southwest versus Northeast. Do you know this? They have like the same addresses, but they're labeled like with different the letters. And so I'm in this like African-American part of town, and this very nice black guy is like, what the hell are you boys doing here? You're in danger. We're like the nerdiest guys with like our big laptop cases. And it's like, and I just remember like no idea what I was doing in this town. And you had people trying to help you. And it's very funny. It's like you had to kiss a lot of frogs in the sense that you had to just like work with a lot of different people, like not knowing like who actually has the ability to make things happen and do things. There's just so many things, and knowing how it works now, it's just so different than obviously what we did. We just had no idea what we were doing, but we just were persistent and kept talking to people, kept impressing them, kept finding people with problems, kept solving their problems and impressing them. Eventually George Tenet was really helpful early on. He had left the CIA after running it under both Bush and Clinton. He basically figured out, it's one of the things we had to do was just really get an analyst groundswell. So here's a bunch of these analysts who need this, and if you solve their problems and they all demand it, and we like amplify that, like that's going to help us with this group over here. So he really helped with some of the strategy, and other people, because there's so many people that say they can help who don't know how to do it. It's funny though, there's like all these conspiracies online now about how this was like a CIA technology. It was not a CIA technology, nor were they helping us. It was like disaster. It was so painful. It's just so funny because I like for the first like several years of this is just like so hard, and you're doing all your best you can, and you're literally building it out of our own, creative minds and iterating to figure out how the best technology could be helping the government. And then you have this like guys online where it's like, there's like conspiracy theorists who millions of people follow her. It's like, yeah, and then they took the CIA technology and they took credit for it and they made money from it. And I'm like, good God, guys. It's like, not what happened. But anyway, it's fine. I guess they shouldn't protest against crazy things. But it's just, it's very funny, like how the stories afterwards. It's just one of those things where we didn't know what we were doing, but we did have like some of the best engineers in the world. I mean, a lot of persistence,
You said when you were first going with the government and trying to work with them, you were a bit naive. You didn't really know how it worked, and now you do. What do you know now about the government you didn't know back then?
There's some people who have no power at all, and some people have real power, and there's like a lot more power in like the armed services committees than you think, and then in the NDAA, and they said the budget in Congress is still very top down there. There's a lot of power in certain parts of the administration. There's a lot of power in certain parts of the service secretaries and the DoD. There's a lot of ways in which generals and admirals can secretly kill things or help things, and there's like really good. I think one of the things that's interesting is just like really good people who build a reputation, knowing what the hell they're doing, who everyone listens to, and then you have to like get to those people and build trust with them and impress them. I mean, like and it's like, listen, I mean, it works very differently now than it did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there were all these other ways the primes could just kill anything and automatically take it for themselves. They literally could just go like, I know you're going to get 40 million to that. It's not going to work. It's going to be a disaster. I'll do it for you. I'll take a hit on it. I probably won't make any profit, but we'll do it for you. Make sure it works. And they'll be like, sure, you can take it. And then we just lost the contract spending it on because like some guy just did that because he's their friend, because whatever, they trust him. Like that's literally how it worked. And it's a disaster. Yeah. And then they go through and have someone do the whole process of filling out the thing as if they won or something. But it's like, and then I'll do the other example that was like, so Epirus, which is a company we started, which is like the best EMP in the world for like shooting down, drones. We shoot down swarms of drones. You can see it online. We can't say how far they get angry at us, but it goes just down far away. And this is great. We figured out it starts in 2018. And so it was kind of neat because we kind of anticipated what happened in Ukraine, obviously. And so we had this big contest 3 or 4 years ago. And it's us, it's Raytheon, it's Northrop, it's like a few L3. And we go out to the desert, and it's a certain size, certain power, and there's hardened drones. And we shot down the hardened drone like 9.5 times farther away. It's pretty good. Like by the way, they wouldn't let us into the contest the year before. We spent like 30-40 million of our own money on this thing. These guys spent billions of dollars. They didn't take us seriously. We crushed them. Like by all any way you could look at this contest, we crushed it. Right after that contest, like there's a bunch of giant, few $100 million things awarded, all to the other primes, and we got like 10 or something. Wow. And then the next year got 50. So it's like, but wait a second, ours is better. And like, well, it was written this way. And I go to the guy who's running the Air Force, who Biden later made the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and now he's out, I think. But I go to this guy, I know he has full power, and I'm like, listen, like everyone knows ours is better. Like, why are they getting a $300 million thing for this? We're obviously betting. He says, well, it'd break a lot of glass. And this guy's thinking I'm about to go command Joint Chief of Staff, and I want to have a big people yelling at me. He's like, and it was written that way, and if you look at it, it requires like these things for our contract. And I said, but we replace those things with chips, and that's why ours works better. Don't you want that? And he's like, yeah, I agree with you. You'll probably win it in a couple of years, but I can't go back and change it now. I'm like, you can't. Technically, he could go back, but of course he's not. He's a politician. Like a lot of these guys are politicians. They don't want to change it. So it's like, and so a lot of what we're trying to do now with our friends in the DoD, it's not. And this is really important to me. It's not. I am coming to talk to you to get money for my companies. It's I'm coming to like talk to you to make these contests fair, set them up ahead of time so that different ways of doing it. If you win in a way that's like useful for the armed forces, I think it's DOW by the way, not DOD, sorry. But if you set it up in a way that's like useful for the armed forces, the winner should get most of the contract, not the other guy. The person who like clearly wins. So it's things like that where it still doesn't work the way it should, but we're shifting it. But even then, I'll be told, even then, you need to have teams in DC making sure the right people know you, making sure the right people are comfortable with what you're doing, which is not totally insane. You can't just be like a random, because you have to have a company that people are sure about. So it's like when you build these things, I won't go too long on this, but you build these things, you need to have like the best product and tech that's 10 times better, and you need to have an A+ team and play the game in DC. You need to have both. Exactly. And that's something that I didn't appreciate before.
Touching on the A+ team stuff, talk a bit about those talent clusters we talked about. You now left Palantir, you started Adipar. You also, as we mentioned, you had Scott Wu take a gap year before college to work with you at Adipar. Scott Wu,
so this guy, my friend Vlad, was a really good engineer, and he helped recruit a bunch of people with me. I spent time on it with him. We had the strategy, and he ended up getting a bunch, I think like 6 of those stars he got that year have gone to build unicorns, which is pretty amazing. And Scott's, I think, is the biggest. So, well, I guess Alex is ahead of Scott for now, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
What really drives you now? Is it this world of this kind of thought of I want to fix the Western world and the ways in which I'll do it, or through some sort of capital deployment? Here's talent here. There's Cicero that you're trying to fix.
Yeah, there's really broken things that are hurting people and making the world dysfunctional. I think it's good to believe in truth and beauty and to believe in the greatest of Western civilization and to fix it and make it work, right? So, like Cicero is all about policies that fix things that are broken, like our prisons. If you're on the left, maybe you want to let more people out. We've seen recently one that's not good. If they're criminals, if you're on the right, maybe you want to lock people up. I probably do want to lock some people up more, but anyway, that's not the point. We can both agree that if someone's coming out, we want them to come out and be more likely to get a job and more likely not to come back. And so how do you measure these things? How do you incentivize these things? How do you have, if you're running hundreds of prisons, like how do you have the better people running them and the worst people not be running them? How do you fix the cultures? This is true of prisons. It's true of vocational schools. It's like you have to set these things up with the right incentives. Like the right incentives for a vocational school, you could double the salaries coming out. Double, we've shown. And yet a lot of governments still don't do this. So there's just so much in the government that's broken that, I could fix a lot of things by building companies. I mean, we built OpenGov and we made over 3,000 cities work better. It came out of a philanthropic vision originally, but we realized we had to do a for-profit company. And we sold it for $1.8 billion to Cox, who are putting money in to scale it and make the mission go further. So that was like a good exit for it because it could keep doing its mission. So some things you can do with companies, but a lot of things you just got to do with policy. That's just where we are.
Makes sense.
And so, right now, I'm convinced, I really am convinced that AI could make education work better for everyone, especially the least well off, especially just like random kids in the middle of nowhere who don't have access. I think it should make healthcare much, much cheaper and better. Like everyone should be able to afford way better healthcare. Like the same healthcare the best billionaire healthcare is today, everyone should have that in 10 years if we do this correctly. And so this is really cool. And there's right now there's 1,200 laws in 50 states about regulating AI, a lot of which would just set us back by a decade or two, would make China win, would make us not be able to do these things. And so there's things like that where you do have to compromise. You have to make people feel safe. You do have to you can't just lecture them and just ignore their concerns, but you do actually have to make sure we let the innovation succeed and make our civilization better. And that's I think it's a worthy thing to fight for,
Touching on how you're actually thinking through this, I want to make sure we touch on ABC. This was originally Formation 8, and I was talking to Alex Kolchik about this, or maybe I think Bell had asked him. He had said you guys took around 1,000 meetings, or some crazy number, very much back-to-back, to raise this grueling fund.
Our first fund I ever raised, I had a little angel fund called Anduin, but my first real institutional fund when I was doing it as a main thing was Formation 8 Fund 1. And I thought I was just joining on to 3 other guys who basically already had their money circled. And my friend's dad gave us 50 as an anchor, and I thought the rest was just going to come. And to my friend's credit, he did bring in another 100 from Korea, but I basically had to run around and raise the other 300 plus million. And it took me, I think it was actually 1,800 meetings in a year and a half. Wow. And it was what I was doing with a good percent of my time. I was also supposed to be helping run Adipar at the time. I probably wasn't doing quite as good of a job as I could have, if I'm honest, although Adipar's done great now, so I'm proud of it. But I would get distracted, obviously, because I'm like, you know what it was? As I thought this was already going to be done, then I started doing some meetings. Then I could have just given up, or I could have just gone all in. So I just, that's who I am. Once I've agreed to do this, now I have to go all in. Damn it, okay, fine. Yeah. So now let's go all in. Let's figure it out. Let's write the pieces. Let's warehouse the right deals. Let's get the right introductions. Let's just go. And I just went really hard, and we made it work. But man, raising a big fund one at the time, it was smaller than my other friends' funds. Which were getting to $1 billion then. It's 2012.
It's the biggest first fund, right?
At the time, it was the biggest first fund since 2000.
Why did you go so big?
That was at the time. There's been much bigger first funds since then. No, my friends were all managing $1 billion. So I'm okay, 450 is a reasonable amount. It was called Formation 8, so 448 we stopped at. It seemed reasonable at the time. I had no idea that was such a big fund one. Anyway, it worked out. It was a good size for what we do.
Yeah. How did you think about forming ABC and the people you formed it with, the people who were core to it?
Because I was running Formation 8 already, I had learned a lot, and so 2/3 of the people came over with me, and then I added on. But I wanted people who were more entrepreneurial for 8VC. I wanted people who were mostly operator mindset, who were builders as well, like me. VC was going through a really big change in the early 2010s. I think most of VC was smart people, but they would have lots of time for golf and lots of time. Nothing against golf. My partner Drew he has no kids. He plays golf, which I know. It's nothing against it, but they had lots of free time. It was it wasn't a didn't seem like a full-time job to everyone who was doing it. But for us, we treated it like a startup. We treated it like a 70, 80-hour-a-week job. And I wanted that culture. And that's what the entrepreneurial culture is.
How do you build that team up? The people who work at ABC are ridiculously loyal. They're very mission aligned. How do you how do you assess people of that nature, and how do you build a team accordingly? You are very principled, and the people at ABC are very similarly.
Yeah, I think you want people who are principled. That's right. I think you want people who are principles driven. I think you want people who are extremely intelligent, hard workers. I think you want people who are really passionate about what they do. And
but how are you tracking this network? You sort of built Affinity eventually to do this, and kind of, okay, I know all these people.
Yeah, between Formation 8 and AVC, that's when Drew and I launched Affinity, which had like 3,500 funds used now. It's a good like AI CRM. And so yeah, we track our networks really well. We like every night I'm here, I'm doing stuff like, tonight we have Cognition and a bunch of guys there, and we have a bunch of talent, and it's just, you just have great people, and you just go.
Who are you excited about the most right now?
You can't have any one of your like kids be the favorite. I have 6 amazing kids, and I have like dozens of amazing companies. Obviously Scott's very exciting. He's doing really cool things. Scott with Cognition, Addepart, I'm still very excited about. We just crossed $8 trillion last month. It's growing very, very well. I'm very proud of Palantir, even though I wish I owned more of it these days, but it's great. There's a lot of these AI services companies, a few really particularly great ones where, I probably talked about this too much in other contexts, but basically like I'm really bullish on like using AI to fix different large services sectors of the economy that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And so there's things like, Candid and Loop and others that are just crushing it there. There's newer checks we're writing into new companies, and they're going to piss everyone off by not mentioning them. We just did an investment. I guess it's not announced yet, but yeah, I don't think you'd mind me saying. Like we're investing in Bobby Art is something I'm really bullish on, where it's a great example of just like an app company that like has really strong AI talent, and it's just growing really fast. And I think it's actually like a much bigger part of the economy than people realize. So there's just a lot of fun stuff to do right now. AI companies are growing much faster than I'm used to.
Mm-hmm. There's a common question that this interviewer called Patrick O'Shaughnessy loves to ask a lot of his people he interviews. And the question is, what's the kindest thing somebody's done for you?
It's really nice when people reach out and say nice things and say they appreciate stuff you're doing, which, there's some people who've like reached out and like, donated and supported our work at the University of Austin, or our work at our policy group at Cicero, which I really, really appreciate. It's really kind when they come in and they help with that. We dedicated part of like the archaeological dig at the Western Wall that I'm really inspired by to my late mother. And that was a really special thing to be able to do, and to be able to have that. And so bring my father. And my stepmom taking care of my dad, and the way she does it, and the way she helps our family is like really, really kind. So it's tough. There's a lot of good people in our lives.
Yeah. How do you think about sort of paying forward that kindness in terms of higher education, University of Austin?
Yeah, well, we're trying. My best way to pay it forward is to do what I do best at, which is to fight for our civilization and try to make. I think on the margin, when you make your civilization better and more functional, and you fix things, you end up like touching millions of lives, and you end up having on the margin like people get cured who wouldn't get cured because there was more wealth and more confidence to have these diseases handled, and these things didn't break down, and there was these wars that didn't happen, there was these attacks that didn't happen when Palantir's stopped dozens of major attacks thanks to the work of my friends and I there. I think it's good to be kind in person too, and to be generous to people in your life. So I think you really want to be generous to people who are working with you and for you, and find ways to take care of them and make sure they're successful and their families are successful. So I think that's maybe a form of kindness that's like more personal, and I think it is important to have the personal touch too. I think you can probably judge people by how they're treating people who are really close to them and work with their family. So I think that's important. But I think most of my effort, like intellectually, goes towards like these bigger battles that hopefully make things more functional and more beautiful for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the thing that keeps you most busy now? You said you only want to have one failure point at any given
AVC.
moment.
No, I run AVC, our venture firm. We start companies, invest in companies. My other two things is I'm chairman of a university and chairman of a policy group. But Carlos runs our university, right? And there's like, we have great people running our policy group. So I run the venture firm, and that's there's 70 people there. It's a lot. Running a venture firm is a lot of work. Yeah. So that's listen. And I'm building a new company, Thorin, there, that's trying to help make me and other leaders more productive, that I'm very excited about. And so that's like, in terms of like what I'm most excited about building, that's the thing I'm building inside of AVC right now. The same way I built Affinity in the past, and it's a great company. But it's yeah, AVC is like my job. Yeah. I mean, people give you money. When people give you $1 billion to manage, at a time, that's like it's important to do it right. Yeah.
There's a couple of stories I've heard of you. I forgot where it was. Maybe you were in North Bay with Vivek, and there were a bunch of mosquitoes, and you wanted to build this little mosquito zapper.
I've been wanting to build a mosquito laser for quite a while. The problem is that it's illegal for consumer use to have lasers above a certain power level. And I'm pretty sure you could have them just below the power level and all like triangulate and have like 8 of them hit it at once. So you'd probably get it. It'd probably be safe. So I'm not convinced this is impossible, but the law makes it somewhat difficult. But this is just like, if there's a problem, you should figure out how to fix it in a smart way.
Are there any things that really excite you? I know like Thorn is one of them, but what are some companies you want to incubate? Saronic has been doing amazing things.
I mean, America needed to be able to produce warships again. I need to produce hundreds and thousands of them. I need to know how to produce ships in general again.
What's something people aren't doing that you think people should make? And maybe ABC will incubate this.
This is why I start like 4 companies a year. So there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff.
What's top of mind? The thing that hasn't yet been done that really has to get done.
Yeah, well, Thornton's most top of mind. Just literally like figuring out how to support leaders. I think it's like engineers are very egalitarian. So anything that like supports a leader of their team is like unintuitive to them because they want to build things for the common or for the average, not for like the leader. So that's a big gap. There probably are other things like that, like building for inegalitarian, building for the fact that the world is not equal and that there's not equal in all senses. Obviously, there's equal human dignity, but there's inequalities in us in lots of different ways. And I think people don't build enough for that probably.
If there was a book about your life, what would the title be and why?
Oh well, we're not done yet. I don't know. We're still just getting going. So I don't have an opinion on that yet.
Are there any common themes that you would posit that you would say are common themes in your life? Obviously, I've put some out. There's like follow talent dense ecosystems, so like follow these archaic industries. What would you say are themes?
Well, I think courage is really important. I think you have to be courageous to go after things that are broken, and you have to be courageous to, like, the things that really matter in terms of philanthropy and in terms of building is the stuff that others are not courageous enough to have done for whatever reason. And there's a lot of them right now. There's all these billionaires. I got in trouble for like lashing out at Mark Benioff. I felt bad. He reached out, like I saw recently, but it's like a lot of philanthropy, a lot of people like him have done. It's like the popular thing to do. It's the current thing. It's a thing everyone's going to laud by default. And so it's frustrating because he's so smart, obviously, in some other areas. Like you can't build Salesforce to be what it was without getting a lot of things right. And yet it's clear he's not really using the full power of his brain or he's just not willing to be controversial. So if he finds something that's broken, but there's special interests that would attack him, you're just like, oh, go away. Yeah. Don't deal with it. And that's most people.
Yeah.
It's actually fascinating. I was asking Karp, like, why don't these billionaires stand up and like fight these policy things I'm trying to fix? And why don't they build new universities? And why don't they like go after the stuff we all know is broken in these different areas? He's like, well, a lot of the billionaires, first of all, they might have made their money in ways they're not proud of. They don't want everyone looking at them and attacking them.
Yeah.
Second of all, they might have complicated private lives. Maybe they have mistresses or whatever. It's going to come out when people attack them. And then third, they're mostly like too old at this point. They're not entrepreneurial anymore. They're doing one thing and they don't do other things. And I think he didn't say it to me, but I think the fourth is like most people are cowards.
Yeah.
So I think for me, like being able, like I think what a leader does, like what a good king does, is you pick up the sword, you charge to front. And I know we don't do that anymore because of machine guns and other things anymore, but like that was like what a king's job was. And to me, that was how my dad raised me. And that is why I'm able to like solve a lot of problems. And I want to try to keep doing that. And every success I have is a bigger platform from which to fight and fix things. And so I think we're just getting started.